The cold metal floor of Luna Station vibrated beneath Admiral Kim Soo's boots as he walked across the command bridge. Outside the massive viewing windows, Earth hung like a blue marble in the darkness, peaceful and unaware of what was coming. Kim Soo had spent 40 years protecting that world, and now it might all be for nothing. "Admiral, you need to see this," Lieutenant Park Ji said, her voice tight with fear. She was young, maybe 25, fresh from the academy with bright eyes that had never seen real war. Those eyes weren't bright anymore. Kim Soo moved to her station and looked at the holographic display that floated above her desk. Red dots marked enemy positions throughout the solar system. There were hundreds of them. Each red dot was a ship bigger than anything humanity had ever built. "How many?" he asked. 12 fleets, sir. Each one has at least 30 ships. They're positioned around every human colony, every space station, every mining operation. They have us completely surrounded." Kim Soo nodded slowly. He had expected this day would come eventually. The Hegemony Council had been watching humanity for decades, growing more nervous with each passing year. Humans were different from other species in the galaxy. Where other races were careful and slow to change, humans were wild and unpredictable. They took risks that made other species shiver with fear. The communication array crackled to life, and a voice filled the bridge. It spoke in perfect Korean, though Kim Soo knew the speaker had never been to Earth. "This is Overlord Vextal, of the Hegemony Council. We address the creatures that call themselves human. Your species has become a threat to the peace and stability of this galaxy. You spread like a disease, consuming resources and turning everything you touch into weapons. This ends now." The voice paused, and Kim Soo could hear his crew holding their breath. "You have 72 standard hours to surrender unconditionally. All human military forces will be disbanded. All human colonies will be evacuated. Your homeworld will be placed under permanent occupation. If you refuse, we will cleanse every human from existence. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Kim Soo looked around at his crew. These were good people, loyal soldiers who had followed him through 3 border conflicts and countless peacekeeping missions. Now they were looking at him with expressions he had never seen before. They were afraid. "Sir," Park Ji whispered, "what do we do?" Kim Soo walked back to the viewing window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of their sensors, alien ships were waiting to destroy everything he had sworn to protect. The Hegemony Council thought they knew humanity. They saw the wars, the weapons, the endless conflicts that seemed to follow humans wherever they went. They thought humans were nothing more than violent animals with advanced technology. They were wrong. Humans were much, much worse than that. "Get me a secure channel to Titan Complex," Kim Soo said. "Priority Alpha clearance." Park Ji's fingers flew over her controls. "Channel open, sir." The holographic display changed to show a tired-looking man in a laboratory coat. Dr. Lee Han looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy, and his eyes were bloodshot, but when he saw Kim Soo, he straightened up. "Admiral," Lee Han said, "I've been monitoring the alien transmissions. I assume you're calling about Project Pandora." Kim Soo nodded. Project Pandora was humanity's deepest secret, hidden in research facilities scattered throughout the outer system. Even Kim Soo didn't know all the details, but he knew enough. For 60 years, the brightest minds of humanity had been working on weapons that were so terrible, so completely against every law of war and decency, that their very existence was known only to a handful of people. "The Council has given us 72 hours, Kim Soo said. "After that, they plan to exterminate our entire species." Lee Han was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. "They want to end humanity because they think we're too dangerous," Lee Han said. "They have no idea what dangerous really means." Kim Soo felt a chill run down his spine. He had authorized the Pandora project, but he had never seen what they were actually creating. The reports he received were always heavily censored, filled with scientific terms he didn't understand. All he knew was that every scientist who worked on the project eventually requested a transfer. Those who stayed too long developed a look in their eyes that reminded Kim Soo of combat veterans. "Are they ready?" Kim Soo asked. "They've been ready for 20 years, Li Han replied. "We've just been hoping we would never have to use them." Kim Soo closed his eyes. In 72 hours, the aliens would attack. Billions of humans would die unless he gave the order that would change everything. The Hegemony Council thought they were dealing with a primitive species armed with nuclear weapons and kinetic projectiles. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first alien contact. "Do it," Kim Soo said. "Open Pandora's box." Li Han nodded, and the transmission ended. Kim Soo turned back to his crew, who were all staring at him with wide eyes. "All hands," Kim Soo announced over the ship's communication system. "Prepare for war." The elevator descended through layers of ice and rock, carrying Dr. Li Han deeper into Titan's frozen heart. The numbers on the display kept climbing. Minus 500 meters, minus 1,000, minus 1,500. Finally, at minus 2,000 meters. The elevator stopped with a soft chime that seemed too cheerful for what waited below. Dr. Choi Min stood beside him, her face pale in the dim, red lighting. She had been working on Project Pandora for only 6 months, but already she looked older. Her hands shook slightly as she clutched her security badge, and her eyes had developed the haunted look that all Pandora researchers eventually acquired. "I still can't believe this place exists," Choi Min whispered as the elevator doors opened. Li Han stepped out into a corridor that stretched into darkness. The walls were made of some black metal that seemed to absorb light, and the air had a strange taste that made his tongue feel numb. Motion sensors detected their presence and activated strips of blue lighting along the floor, creating a path through the shadows. "Believe it," Li Han said. "We've been building this for 60 years. 3 generations of scientists have given their lives to create what's down here." They walked in silence past dozens of sealed doors. Each door had a small window, and through some of them, Choi Min could see things that made her stomach turn. In one room, a mass of black liquid moved across the walls like oil, but oil didn't have eyes. In another, geometric shapes floated in midair, spinning slowly and bending light around them in ways that hurt to look at. "What is that one?" Choi Min asked, pointing to a door marked with radiation warnings. "Nightmare spores," Li Han replied without stopping. "They infect living tissue and turn it into whatever the victim fears most. We tested it on volunteer criminals. The results were ... educational." Choi Min felt sick. She had joined the project, thinking she would be working on defensive technologies. Instead, she found herself helping to build weapons that were so cruel, so completely evil, that even thinking about them made her feel dirty. They passed a section where the walls were lined with glass tubes filled with green liquid. Things floated inside the tubes, things that might have been alive once, but were now something else entirely. Some of them still moved, pressing against the glass with appendages that should not exist. "The alien DNA samples we collected over the years," Li Han explained. "We studied their biology and created viruses specifically designed to attack their cellular structure. Each species gets their own personal plague. But that's biological warfare," Choi Min said. "It's against every treaty, every law of war." Li Han stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were cold and empty, like looking into deep space. "Laws of war," he said. "They're planning to exterminate our entire species. Every man, woman, and child on Earth will be dead in 3 days, unless we act. Do you think they care about laws of war?" They continued deeper into the complex. The corridor split into multiple branches, each leading to different sections of the facility. Signs pointed in various directions: Biological Weapons Division, Quantum Warfare Lab, Psychological Operations Center, Mimetic Hazards Containment. How many people work down here? Choi Min asked. Currently, about 300. But over the decades, thousands of scientists have contributed to the project. Most of them requested transfers after a few years. Working with these weapons changes you. It has to, or you go insane. They took the left branch, heading toward the main vault. The walls here were covered with warning signs in every human language, and several alien ones. Radiation hazard, biohazard, cognitohazard, temporal distortion. Some of the warnings were for dangers that didn't even have names yet. Dr. Park Soo was waiting for them at the vault entrance. She was the senior researcher on the project, an elderly woman who had been working on Pandora since its early days. Her white hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face showed no emotion as she watched them approach. "The Admiral gave the order?" she asked. Li Han nodded. 72 hours until the aliens attack. We need to deploy everything. Park Soo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. "I've been preparing the release mechanisms," she said. "But once we open this vault, there's no going back. Some of these weapons can't be controlled once they're released. They'll spread beyond the alien fleets." Choi Min felt her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Park Soo looked at her with something that might have been pity. "The nanoplugs don't distinguish between alien and human tissue after the first generation. The psychic parasites will infect any intelligent mind they encounter. The quantum viruses, well, they don't care about the difference between us and them at all." "You're saying these weapons will kill humans too?" Choi Min asked. "Eventually," Park Soo replied, "but the aliens will die first, and that's what matters." Li Han placed his palm on the scanner beside the massive vault door. Red lights flashed as the system verified his identity. Warning sirens began to wail, and a computerized voice announced, "Project Pandora activation sequence initiated. All personnel report to safe zones immediately." The vault door was 3 meters thick and covered, with symbols that seemed to move when Choi Min wasn't looking directly at them. As it slowly opened, cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of ozone and something else. Something that made her think of nightmares and screaming. Inside the vault, hundreds of containment units lined the walls. Each one held something that had never existed in nature, something that humanity had created in its darkest hour. "Welcome to Pandora's box," Li Han said quietly. "Let's show the galaxy what monsters really look like." Captain Song Yu stood on the bridge of the human battleship Defiance, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with deadly precision. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, though none of them had expected it to come so soon. "Jump complete, Captain," reported Navigation Officer Kim Hae. "All ships in formation. The alien fleet is directly ahead." Song Yu nodded. Through the main viewing screen, he could see the enemy ships spread out before them like a wall of death. The alien vessels were massive, each one 3 times larger than the biggest human battleship. Their hulls glowed with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like slow heartbeats, and their weapons arrays bristled with energy cannons that could vaporize a city. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Li Bo. "Put it on screen." The viewing screen flickered, and the face of an alien commander appeared. The creature looked like a cross between a squid and a spider, with multiple eyes that glowed red in the darkness of its command bridge. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the ship's computer into perfect Korean. "This is Admiral Kethfer of the Hegemony Council. You have violated the terms of surrender by bringing warships into this sector. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to be boarded." Song Yu smiled, but there was no warmth in it. His smile was like looking at a shark. "This is Captain Song Yu of the Human Defense Fleet," he replied. "We have not come to surrender. We have come to show you what humanity really is." The alien admiral's multiple eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "You are outnumbered 50 to 1. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our armor. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Song Yu's smile grew wider. "Admiral you have made one critical mistake. You think we brought weapons." He turned to his weapons officer. "Mr. Janke, begin the release." Janke's hands moved over his control panel. "Release sequence initiated, Captain. All ships report ready." On the tactical display, small objects began launching from the human ships. They looked harmless enough, like tiny pods or escape capsules. The alien sensors detected them immediately. "What are those?" Kethver demanded. "Some kind of missile?" "No," Song Yu replied. "Those are not weapons. Those are our children." The pods began to open in the vacuum of space, releasing clouds of microscopic particles that spread outward like invisible smoke. The alien ship's shields tried to block them, but the particles passed through energy barriers as if they didn't exist. "Captain," reported sensor technician Park Yoon, "first contact with enemy vessels in 30 seconds. Song Yu watched the tactical display as the clouds of nanobots reached the alien fleet. At first, nothing happened. The enemy ships continued their approach, weapons charging for the attack that would wipe out the human fleet. Then the screaming started. It began with the Valen Empire's ships. The Valens were a hive mind species, millions of individual creatures linked together by psychic bonds. Their ships were alive, grown rather than built, with nervous systems that connected every part of the vessel to the collective consciousness. The psychic parasites that humanity had released found those neural networks and dove in like hungry wolves. "What is happening?" Kethver shouted, as his communication system filled with the sounds of agony. The Valen ships began to change course randomly, their formations breaking apart as their hive mind fractured into 1,000 screaming voices. "The Valens are experiencing what we call cognitive invasion," Song Yu explained calmly. "Our parasites are rewriting their shared consciousness. Instead of thinking together, they're now sharing every nightmare, every fear, every moment of pain that any individual Valen has ever experienced." On the viewing screen, they could see one of the Valen bioships beginning to tear itself apart. Its living hull rippled and twisted as the creature's own immune system turned against it, convinced that every part of itself was a deadly infection. But the Valens were not the only ones suffering. The nanoplugs had reached the metal ships of the Corvin assembly, and the results were even more dramatic. The microscopic machines began rewriting the molecular structure of the alien hulls, turning solid metal into something that resembled living tissue. "Hull integrity failing across multiple enemy vessels," Park Yoon reported. "The nanobots are converting their ships into organic matter." Song Yu watched as a massive Corvin dreadnought began to sprout what looked like tumors along its hull. The tumors grew rapidly, consuming the ship's armor and spreading inward. Within minutes, the once proud warship had become something that belonged in a nightmare. A twisted mass of flesh and metal that pulsed with unnatural life. The quantum viruses were the worst of all. They infected the basic laws of physics around the alien ships, making reality unstable. Energy weapons fired and then turned back on themselves. Gravity fluctuated wildly, crushing some ships while sending others spinning helplessly through space. Time moved differently in random patches, causing some alien vessels to age decades in seconds while others froze in temporal loops. "This is impossible," Kethver whispered, his multiple eyes wide with terror. "Weapons cannot do this. Physics cannot work this way." "You're right," Song Yu agreed. "Normal weapons can't do this. But we didn't bring normal weapons. We brought the tools of creation itself, twisted into instruments of destruction." Half the hegemony fleet was already gone, consumed by the horrors that humanity had unleashed. The surviving ships tried to retreat, but the clouds of microscopic nightmares followed them, spreading faster than any ship could run. Please, Kethver begged. Call them back. We surrender. We'll leave human space forever. Song Yu shook his head. I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral. You see, we didn't create these things to win a battle. We created them to remake the galaxy itself. The last thing Kethver saw was his own ship beginning to change, its bioluminescent hull darkening as something hungry began eating it from within. Dr. Yang Su stood in the observation deck of Orbital Station Alpha, staring at the massive holographic display that showed the galaxy's current state. Red zones marked areas where the weapons had spread, and every day, more systems turned red. What had started as humanity's desperate defense had become something far worse. Doctor, you need to see this, called Technician MDA, from her monitoring station. Her voice was shaky, and when Yang Su looked at her, he saw that her hands were trembling as she worked her controls. Yang Su walked over to her station, his footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. The observation deck was normally busy with dozens of technicians and scientists, but most of them had requested transfers to other stations. Few people could handle watching what was happening to the galaxy. Show me, Yang Su said. IMDA activated. Her display, and a three-dimensional map appeared in the air between them. It showed the Corvin sector, once home to 12 thriving star systems. Now, 11 of those systems showed no energy signatures at all. They had gone completely dark. The nanoplugs reached the Corvin archive worlds 6 days ago, MDA explained. At first, they behaved normally, consuming the metal in their ships and stations. But then something changed. She manipulated the controls, and the display zoomed in on the dead systems. Yang Su could see the remains of planets that had once been covered with great cities and libraries. Now they were just empty rocks floating in space. What am I looking at? Yang Su asked, though part of him didn't want to know. The nanobots evolved, Imda whispered. They learned to eat energy itself. Not just the energy from power plants or reactors, but all energy. Heat, light, radiation, even the nuclear fusion in the stars. Yang Su felt his blood turn cold. They had designed the nanoplugs to adapt and improve themselves, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. The tiny machines were not just destroying alien technology anymore. They were unmaking the fundamental forces that held the universe together. The stars are dying, Imda continued. 3 entire suns have been consumed completely. The planets in those systems are now frozen. Rocks with no light, no heat, nothing. It's like the nanobots are creating zones of absolute death. Yang Su looked at other parts of the display. The Zephyrin Empire's territory showed a different kind of destruction. Instead of darkness, their worlds pulsed with chaotic energy patterns. That made no sense. What about the psychic parasites? Yang Su asked. Imda switched the display to show the Zephyron systems. The parasites infected their hive mind 3 weeks ago. The Zephyrins used telepathic networks to connect their entire civilization. Every individual was linked to every other individual across hundreds of worlds. She paused, her face growing even paler. The parasites didn't just infect individual minds, they infected the connections themselves. Now the entire Zephyron Empire is trapped in a shared nightmare that grows stronger every day. Their cities are still running, their machines still work, but there's no one home anymore. The people just wander around in circles, screaming inside their own heads. Yang Su watched the energy readings from the Zephyrin worlds. The patterns were wrong. Twisted in ways that suggested madness had become a physical force. Entire planets were broadcasting psychic screams that could be detected across light years. Sir, Imda said quietly, I'm detecting something else. The parasites are spreading beyond the Zephyrins. They're learning to infect non-telepathic species. 2. The Corvin survivors who escaped to the outer colonies are starting to show signs of infection. Yang Su nodded grimly. The Corvins had been one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, masters of technology and knowledge. Their archive worlds contained millions of years of accumulated wisdom from hundreds of species. Now those archives were feeding grounds for entities that consumed information itself. How? Yang Su asked. The Corvins aren't telepathic. The parasites evolved, Imda replied. They found a way to create artificial neural connections. They're spreading through communication networks, computer systems, even written language. Anyone who reads infected text becomes a carrier. She brought up another display, showing refugee camps on the galaxy's outer rim. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species had fled there, hoping to escape the spreading chaos. But even in the camps, strange things were happening. The quantum viruses are the worst, MDA continued. They don't just infect living things or machines, they infect reality itself. Look at this. The display showed a section of space where the laws of physics had become completely unstable. Time moved backward in some areas while accelerating wildly in others. Matter would spontaneously transform into energy, then back into matter, but with different properties than before. Ships that entered those regions might emerge as clouds of gas, or as solid blocks of exotic matter. Or sometimes they would emerge before they had entered, creating temporal paradoxes that made Yang Su's head hurt to think about. We created these weapons to save humanity, Yang Su said, his voice barely a whisper. But they're destroying everything, even things that had nothing to do with the war. MDA looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Doctor, I'm getting reports that some of the outer human colonies are starting to show signs of infection. The weapons don't seem to distinguish between human and alien anymore. They've evolved beyond our control. Yang Su stared at the display, watching as another star system went dark. In just 3 months, humanity's desperate gamble had turned into something that threatened all life in the galaxy. They had unleashed forces that fed on the very concepts of existence, order, and sanity. What have we become? MDA whispered. Yang? Su didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was too terrible to say out loud. They had become exactly what the aliens had always said they were, a cancer that destroyed everything it touched. Captain Zhang Ho stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, humanity's most advanced warship, looking out at a galaxy that no longer resembled the one he had grown up in. 6 months had passed since the hegemony's ultimatum, and the universe itself had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The viewing screen showed what used to be the great trade routes between the core worlds. Now there was only darkness punctuated by strange lights that moved in patterns that hurt to look at. Entire sectors had become dead zones where the laws of physics no longer worked properly. Time moved backward in some places, while in others, matter spontaneously transformed into energy and back again in endless cycles. Captain, called Communications Officer Parkman, were receiving another transmission from the hegemony survivors. Zhang Ho nodded. These transmissions had been coming regularly for the past month, growing more desperate each time. The proud alien empire that had once threatened to exterminate humanity was now reduced to a handful of ships hiding in the galaxy's outer rim, begging for mercy. Put it through, Zhang Ho ordered. The screen flickered, and the face of a Corvin appeared. The alien's normally blue skin had turned a sickly gray color, and its 4 eyes darted nervously as it spoke. Zhang Ho recognized this one. It was Counselor Jektar, one of the few hegemony leaders who had survived the initial wave of destruction. Please, the alien begged, its voice breaking with desperation. We know we made a mistake. We never should have threatened your species. We offer complete surrender, total submission. Take our technology, our resources, our worlds, everything we have left. Just make it stop. Behind the Corvin, Zhang Ho could see other alien survivors crowded into what looked like a refugee transport. There were maybe 50 of them, the last remnants of civilizations that had once ruled hundreds of star systems. Dr. Besu stepped forward from her position near the science station. She was an elderly woman with gray hair and tired eyes, the last surviving member of Project Pandora's original research team. Most of her colleagues had died during the creation of the weapons, and those who lived had been changed by what they had built. "Captain," she said quietly, "they want us to call back the weapons." Jang Ho looked at her for a moment. Besu had been there from the beginning, had helped design the nanoplugs and quantum viruses that were now consuming the galaxy. If anyone understood what they had unleashed, it was her. "Can we?" he asked. Besu shook her head slowly. "No, we designed them specifically to be impossible to control once released. They evolve, adapt, and spread on their own. Even if we wanted to stop them, we couldn't." Jang Ho turned back to the communication screen. The Corvin was still pleading, offering to serve as slaves, to worship humans as gods, anything to make the nightmare end. "Tell them the truth," Jang Ho said. Besu moved to the communication console and activated the transmitter. Her voice was calm and steady as she spoke to the remnants of the galaxy's former rulers. "This is Dr. Besu of the Human Defense Fleet," she began. "I was one of the scientists who created the weapons that are destroying your civilizations. You ask us to call them back, but that is impossible." The Corvin's eyes widened with horror. "Impossible, but you created them." "We created them to be unstoppable," Besu continued. "The nanoplugs, the psychic parasites, the quantum viruses, they were never meant to be weapons in the traditional sense. They were meant to be forces of nature, as inevitable as entropy itself." She paused, looking at something beyond the screen, perhaps remembering the dark days when Project Pandora was being developed. "You called us a cancer," she said. "You said we were too dangerous to exist, that we would spread and consume everything in our path. You were right." The Corvan began to speak, but Besu continued. "We didn't create these terrors to win a war. Wars end. Winners and losers eventually make peace and rebuild. We created them to become what you always claimed we were, the thing that ends everything else." On the tactical display, Jang Ho could see the latest reports from across the galaxy. The dark zones were still expanding. Entire star clusters had gone silent as the nanoplugs consumed their energy. The psychic parasites had infected the collective unconscious of 3 more species, turning their dreams into waking nightmares that spread like viruses through their neural networks. "Please," the Corvin whispered. "There must be something you can do." Besu's expression didn't change. "The weapons are evolving beyond even our understanding. They've learned to feed on concepts themselves, on the ideas of order, sanity, and existence. They don't distinguish between alien and human anymore. Eventually, they'll consume us too." "Then why?" the Corvin asked. "Why destroy everything, including yourselves?" Jang Ho stepped forward to answer that question. "Because you gave us a choice," he said. "Extinction or transformation. We chose transformation. We chose to become the monsters you always said we were, because at least monsters survive." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Through the viewing screen, Jang Ho could see strange lights moving between the stars, the weapons continuing their work, spreading and evolving and consuming. They were no longer humanity's tools. They had become something else entirely. Something that existed beyond the concepts of creation and destruction. Humanity had survived the hegemony's ultimatum. But in doing so, they had become something that was no longer quite human. They were the new masters of a dying galaxy, rulers of an empire built on the bones of reality itself. The galaxy had new gods now, and they had human faces. Whether that was salvation or damnation, only time would tell.